My God, this incredible HFY masterpiece found you today. Witness the legend, starting now.
They dropped us on a Deathworld where trained soldiers survived 3 days at best. The human cadet smiled and called it spring break. Look, I have survived 3 civil wars, 2 attempted coups, and 1 very unfortunate incident involving a malfunctioning airlock and my captain's prize-winning Florgin cactus collection. I say this to establish credibility, because what I am about to tell you sounds completely, utterly, impossibly fabricated. But I swear on my ancestors' thermal glands, every single word is true. They dropped us, 47 cadets from 19 different species, onto a Class 3 Deathworld for our final survival examination. Class 3. Let me repeat that for anyone who does not understand the severity. Class 3. Deathworld. These are planets where simply breathing the air could kill you within hours if you are not properly equipped. Planets where the flora has evolved 15 different ways to murder you, and the fauna has perfected 20 more. The Galactic Coalition uses Class 3 worlds for extreme punishment details and high-security prisons. And somehow, impossibly, the human girl called it, and I quote, basically spring break. My name is Vrecht of the Theraxian Concordat, 3rd generation military, and up until 6 rotations ago, I thought I had seen everything the galaxy could throw at a cadet. I was wrong. So spectacularly, magnificently wrong. The Galactic Coalition Military Academy does not mess around. They take the best, the brightest, the most capable young beings from across 400-member worlds and systematically break them down before building them back up into proper officers. The washout rate hovers around 60%, the injury rate. Well, we do not talk about that in the recruitment materials. For our final examination, they had decided on something special. Something that would test every skill we had learned over 4 grueling years. Survival training on a genuine certified, no fooling around Deathworld. Now, for those fortunate enough to have never consulted the Galactic Hazard Classification System, let me educate you. Class 1 worlds are your standard garden variety habitable planets, breathable atmosphere, manageable gravity, maybe a predator or 2 but nothing a reasonably armed individual cannot handle. Class 2 worlds are more challenging, toxic atmosphere, extreme temperatures, aggressive wildlife, that sort of thing. Annoying but survivable with proper equipment and training. Class 3 worlds? Class 3 worlds are where nature has actively decided that life is a mistake and has spent millions of years perfecting the art of proving that point. We are talking about planets where the rain is acidic, the plants are carnivorous, and the local wildlife views anything that moves as either food or a threat to be eliminated. The survival rate for untrained personnel on a Class 3 world is approximately 14 hours. With training, maybe 3 days if you are very, very lucky and extremely paranoid. The Galactic Coalition maintains exactly 7 Class 3 worlds in known space. 6 are used as maximum security prison colonies where the environment does most of the guard work. The 7th, Cadets 7, is reserved exclusively for military training exercises, and even then only for special operations forces who have already proven themselves in actual combat. So naturally, some genius at Academy Command decided to drop 47 final-year cadets, most of whom had never seen real combat, onto Cadets 7 for a full 7-day survival trial. The briefing room had gone absolutely silent when Commander Thayax announced the plan. You could have heard a pin drop in a vacuum. My secondary heart started palpitating immediately. Across the room, I watched a Kikshin cadet's scales shift to the pale blue of existential dread. Someone in the back row made a sound somewhere between a whimper and a prayer. Then from the human section of the assembly, someone laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not a "this is how I cope with terror" laugh. An actual genuine "this is going to be fun" laugh. I turned, along with approximately 46 other cadets, to stare at the human who had apparently lost her entire mind. Her name was Bridget O'Malley, and she looked absolutely delighted. Humans had only joined the Galactic Coalition about 30 years prior, and their reputation preceded them. Stories circulated through the barracks. Crazy stories. Humans who had survived vacuum exposure for nearly 2 minutes. Humans who had walked away from crashes that should have liquefied their internal organs. Humans who treated chemical weapons like minor inconveniences and radiation like a mild sunburn. I had assumed most of these stories were exaggerations. Propaganda, perhaps, or the kind of tall tales soldiers tell to make themselves sound impressive. Bridget O'Malley was my first actual human roommate at the academy, and for 4 years she had seemed relatively normal. Well, normal-ish. She did have some odd habits, like her obsession with something called coffee, a beverage that smelled like industrial solvent and apparently contained enough stimulants to kill a Drexian battle horse. or her tendency to exercise for fun, which struck me as deeply psychologically concerning, or the way she would casually mention growing up in a place called Australia, as if that should mean something to the rest of us. But she passed her classes, followed regulations, and generally seemed like a competent, if slightly peculiar, cadet. I had even grown to consider her a friend, in that careful way you befriend someone whose species you do not entirely understand, yet. Now, watching her grin at the prospect of 7 days on a Class 3 Deathworld, I realized I had perhaps been too hasty in my assessment of human normalcy. Commander Thalix, a grizzled Corthian veteran with more scars than scales, fixed Bridget with a look that could melt hull plating. Cadet O'Malley, you find something amusing about this assignment. Bridget straightened, wiped the smile off her face, and snapped to attention. No, sir. Just excited for the challenge. The commander's eye stalks narrowed. We shall see if you maintain that enthusiasm, cadet. Dismissed. As we filed out, I grabbed Bridget's arm. Are you insane? A Class 3 world? She shrugged, still grinning. How bad could it be? Those 5 words should have been my first warning. The drop shuttle hit atmosphere like a brick thrown through a window, and the entire cabin filled with the sound of rattling equipment and panicked breathing from approximately 46 different species. Bridget, naturally, was humming something she called a beach tune. Through the viewport, Carrick 7 looked like someone had taken a perfectly nice planet and then decided to make it as hostile as physically possible. The sky was a sickly greenish yellow, perpetually choked with storm clouds that crackled with lightning in colors I did not know lightning could be. The landscape below was a nightmare of jagged rock formations, dense jungle that seemed to writhe even from orbit, and what looked like acid lakes that bubbled and steamed. Oh wow. Bridget pressed her face against the viewport. It looks like Costa Rica mixed with Iceland. That is so cool. I did not know what either of those places were, but her tone suggested they were somehow not terrifying. This concerned me deeply. The cadet next to me, a Ploverian named Kukst, was cycling through about 15 different anxiety colors. His breathing apparatus was fogging up, and his manipulator tentacles had tied themselves into knots. We are going to die. We are absolutely going to die. Probably not all of us, I said, trying to sound reassuring and failing spectacularly. Statistics suggest at least 60% survival rate with proper training. 60%, Kix whispered. 60. That means 4 in 10 do not make it. Math checks out, Bridget said cheerfully. But hey, look on the bright side. At least it is not raining. The shuttle lurched violently as we descended through a lightning storm. Rain, thick and viscous and faintly glowing, began hammering against the hull with enough force to dent the exterior plating. You were saying, I muttered. Okay, so it is raining. Still not that bad. The landing was controlled chaos. Our pilot, bless her thermal regulators, managed to set us down in a relatively flat clearing without killing anyone. The moment the boarding ramp dropped, the smell hit us. It was a combination of rotting vegetation, sulfur, something sweet that made my threat assessment instincts scream, and ozone from the constant lightning. Cadet Thorne, a massive krellet who stood nearly 3 meters tall and had skin like living stone, took one breath of the outside air and immediately vomited. This triggered a chain reaction among at least 6 other cadets. Bridget bounded down the ramp, took a deep breath, and stretched like she had just woken up from a pleasant nap. Oh man, that humidity though. Takes me right back to summer camp. Your summer camps were in toxic hellscapes? I managed to ask while trying not to inhale too deeply. I mean, have you been to Florida in August? I had no idea what a Florida was, and frankly I was too terrified to ask. The environmental suits we had been issued were top-of-the-line military gear. Full atmospheric filtration, thermal regulation, impact-resistant plating, the works. They were designed to keep us alive in just about any environment the galaxy could produce. Every single cadet immediately began checking their suit seals, running diagnostics, and generally treating the equipment with the reverence it deserved. Bridget unzipped hers halfway and tied the arms around her waist. What are you doing? I practically shrieked. The atmosphere is toxic. She sniffed the air again. It is not that bad. Oxygen content is actually pretty decent. Little sulfur dioxide, some carbon dioxide, nothing a healthy respiratory system cannot handle for a few hours. Plus, these suits get super sweaty. Commander Thalix, who had accompanied us on the drop to see us off, looked at Bridget with an expression somewhere between horror and professional fascination. Cadet O'Malley, regulations clearly state, "Oh, totally, sir, I will zip up if it gets worse." She flashed him a thumbs-up gesture that humans apparently thought was reassuring. The commander opened his mouth, closed it, and then seemed to decide this was a problem for future Commander Thalix. You have 7 days, cadets. Extraction point is 40 kilometers north. Your emergency beacons will activate automatically if your vital signs become critical. Try not to die. It generates excessive paperwork. With that inspiring speech, he boarded the shuttle, and we watched our only easy way off this nightmare planet disappear into the toxic sky. Cookst immediately activated his beacon. Dude! Seriously? Bridget said. We have been here like 5 minutes. I am not taking chances. Kick's translator somehow managed to convey the tremor in his voice. From somewhere in the jungle, something roared. It was not a normal roar. It was the kind of sound that evolution programs into your brain as run now think never. Every cadet froze. Bridget cocked her head, listening. Huh. Big cat maybe? Or like a bear situation. I do not know what those are, I said, my hand instinctively moving to my plasma pistol. Right. Alien stuff. Well, whatever it is, it sounds cranky. Cranky. She called the apex predator of a Class 3 Deathworld cranky. This was going to be a very long 7 days. We had been on the ground for exactly 43 minutes when the first predator attacked. Nobody had even finished unpacking their survival gear. Cadet Vikinthara, a 4-armed Zentari with excellent spatial awareness, was setting up a perimeter scanner when something exploded out of the underbrush at a speed that should not have been possible for anything that size. I caught a glimpse of scales, way too many teeth, and limbs that bent in directions that violated several laws of biology. The creature was roughly the size of a ground transport, colored in patterns that hurt to look at directly, and it was fast. Terrifyingly, impossibly fast. Vixthera screamed, all 4 arms flailing, and fell backwards into the mud. 20 cadets immediately drew weapons. 10 more activated their emergency beacons. Consequences be damned. 3 fainted outright, which honestly seemed like a reasonable response. Bridget grabbed a rock. Not her plasma pistol, which was standard issue and hanging right there on her belt. Not the shock baton that every cadet carried. Not even the survival knife that regulations required us to keep accessible at all times. A rock. A palm-sized, completely ordinary rock. Hey, she shouted at the creature, which had its attention focused entirely on the prone and panicking Vixthara. Over here, ugly. The predator's head, and I use that term loosely because it seemed to be mostly mouth swiveled toward Bridget. Its eyes, at least 6 of them arranged in a pattern that made my brain hurt, fixed on her with unmistakable hostile intent. Bridget, get back. I raised my plasma pistol, trying to get a clear shot that would not also hit the human who had apparently decided suicide by wildlife was her preferred exit strategy. The creature charged her. Bridget wound up like she was at some kind of sporting event and hurled the rock with everything she had. Now, I had seen Bridget in combat training. Humans have this bizarre ability to throw objects with absurd accuracy. Something to do with their shoulder joints evolving specifically for that purpose. But this was different. This was not training. This was a rock, traveling at a velocity that seemed to defy her muscle mass, hitting a charging predator directly in one of its primary eyes. The creature made a sound like a steam pipe exploding and veered off course, crashing into a tree with enough force to snap the trunk. It thrashed, disoriented and angry, and then bolted back into the jungle, leaving a trail of vegetation destruction in its wake. Silence. Complete, total, shocked silence. Vixthera lay in the mud, all 4 arms trembling. You killed it. Nah, Bridget said, brushing off her hands. Just gave it something to think about. Probably half blind now, though. Should leave us alone. Should? I could not believe what I was hearing. Should? That thing could come back. Could, Bridget agreed. But probably will not. Predators do not usually stick around after getting hurt. Not worth the energy expenditure. She said this with the confidence of someone discussing weather patterns, not lethal alien fauna. Commander Thalix had told us that Carrick 7 was home to approximately 237 documented species of megafauna, at least 80 of which were apex predators. The creature that had just attacked us was not even in the top 20 most dangerous. This realization did not help anyone's mood. We need to establish a defensive position, I said, trying to take charge before more cadets activated their emergency beacons. Fortified perimeter, elevated observation posts, overlapping fields of fire. Or, Bridget said, squatting down to examine some tracks in the mud, we could just avoid their territory. See these markings? Territorial boundaries. The big toothy guy was probably just checking us out because we landed right in his hunting ground. If we move like half a kilometer that way, we should be fine. Should be fine, Kix repeated, his color now a deep purple that I had learned meant extreme skepticism mixed with terror. Your species has a very optimistic definition of that phrase. By the time we actually managed to move camp and set up something resembling a secure position, the sun, or rather suns because of course this nightmare planet had binary stars, were beginning to set. The temperature dropped 15 degrees in as many minutes, the humidity somehow increased, which I had not thought possible, and the sounds from the jungle shifted from merely unsettling to actively horrifying. Something howled in the distance. Something else answered. A third something made a noise like grinding metal mixed with screaming. 17 cadets huddled inside the environmental shelters we had managed to erect, survival gear clutched like religious talismans, staring at every shadow with the wide-eyed expression of people reconsidering their career choices. Bridget sat outside on a rock eating a ration bar and watching the sunset. The toxic radiation-soaked, deadly sunset. You know, she said as I approached, trying to convince her to please, for the love of everything sacred, come inside the shelter. This really is not that different from spring break my sophomore year. I stared at her. Spring break? Yeah, you know, school holiday. Students go somewhere warm, party, have a good time. This? I gestured at the hellscape surrounding us, at the sounds of things hunting in the darkness, at the faintly glowing rain that had started falling again. Is your idea of a good time? She shrugged. I mean, that year we went to Cancun and there was this hurricane warning, right? And the power went out and the water got contaminated and then there was that incident with the drug cartel and the local police. But we made the best of it, built a still out of spare parts, learned some Spanish, made friends with a few locals. Good times. I sat down heavily on another rock, my threat assessment instincts having simply given up and shut down entirely. Your planet is insane. Earth? Nah, Earth is great. She took another bite of her ration bar. A little stabby in places, sure, and the weather can be dramatic, and okay, yes, there are like a dozen different ways the ecosystem is actively trying to kill you at any given moment, but you get used to it. How is Earth classified? I asked, suddenly needing to know. In the galactic hazard system, Bridget shrugged. No idea. Never really came up in my orientation. That, right there, should have been my second warning. Because if it never came up, if nobody thought to mention it during her integration into the coalition, that meant one of two things. Either Earth was so harmless it was not worth mentioning, or it was so dangerous that the coalition had decided ignorance was mercy. Based on the last 43 minutes, I was betting heavily on option 2. Day 2 started with Bridget teaching a masterclass in what she called wilderness survival and what I would call systematically violating every safety protocol in the Galactic Coalition Handbook. Okay, so first rule of survival, she announced to the assembled cadets, most of whom looked like they had not slept at all, is water. You can go 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, 3 minutes without air. So we need to find a clean water source. The water here is toxic, Cadet Thorne rumbled, his voice still raspy from yesterday's vomiting incident. Scans show heavy metal contamination, acidic pH levels, and probable bacterial pathogens. Right. So we filter it, Bridget said, like this was obvious. With what equipment? I asked. The filtration units were in the supply drop that landed in the acid lake. Bridget grinned, with dirt, rocks, and charcoal. Come on, I will show you. What followed was perhaps the most stressful hour of my life. And remember, I had already survived a predator attack and spent a night listening to the sounds of things eating other things, just beyond our perimeter. Bridget led us to a stream that looked like it could dissolve titanium plating. The water was a disturbing shade of orange, bubbled occasionally, and smelled like burning electronics. She proceeded to build what she called a biological filter, using layers of sand, gravel, charcoal from our campfire, and some kind of moss she had identified as non-carnivorous, which was apparently the best recommendation you could get for plant life on Carrick 7. This will not work, Kickseed said, his color now a resigned gray. This is insane. We are all going to die of poisoning. Bridget poured the orange horror water through her improvised filter. It came out clear. Well, clearish. More translucent than transparent. She held it up to the light, sniffed it, and then before anyone could stop her, took a drink. 11 cadets gasped. 3 closed their eyes, unable to watch. I felt my secondary heart stop entirely. Bridget swished the water around her mouth like she was sampling wine. Little metallic aftertaste, but yeah, totally drinkable. The charcoal absorbs most of the heavy metals, the sand and gravel catch particulates, and the moss actually secretes something that neutralizes the acidity. Pretty cool adaptation. Actually, how did you know that? Vixithara asked, all four arms crossed in suspicion. About the moss? I did not. But I figured, if it grows right next to the stream, it probably has some mechanism for dealing with the water chemistry, evolution and all that. Plus, it smells kind of minty and toxic stuff usually smells terrible. That is not scientific, I protested weakly. No, but it works. Also, I licked a little bit first to test it, and I am not dead, so we are good. She said this like licking potentially lethal alien moss was a completely normal risk assessment strategy. By midday, Bridget had convinced approximately half the cadets to trust her water filtration system. Mostly because dehydration was becoming a serious concern, and our water supplies were running low. The other half continued to ration their emergency supplies and pray for extraction. Then came the food situation. Most of the plants here are poisonous, Cadet Senna, a Foraxian with advanced botanical training, explained while examining a local fern-like growth. This one produces spores that cause respiratory paralysis. That one has sap that is corrosive. And this beautiful flowering specimen, releases a neurotoxin when touched that causes violent hallucinations followed by cardiac arrest. Okay, but what about that one? Bridget pointed at a vine with bulbous purple fruits. Zena scanned it with her analyzer. Extremely toxic. The fruit contains alkaloids that would shut down your central nervous system within minutes. Cool. What about for not humans? What do you mean, not humans? The toxins would be lethal to any carbon-based life form. Bridget walked over, pulled one of the fruits and squeezed it. Thick purple juice oozed out. She touched her finger to the juice, then touched her tongue to her finger. Bitter. Probably high tannin content. She waited a moment. Not dead yet. I think humans might process these differently. Bridget, no! I lunged forward, but she had already taken a small bite. We waited. 10 seconds. 30 seconds. A full minute. Bridget chewed thoughtfully. Yeah, it is fine. Kind of tastes like a bitter plum mixed with battery acid, but edible. Human digestive systems are pretty robust. We have really acidic stomachs and livers that can break down most organic toxins. Most? Zena looked horrified. I mean, some stuff will still kill us. But we co-evolved with a lot of poisonous plants back on Earth, so we developed pretty solid countermeasures. Our liver enzymes are nuts, she said this with pride. Like having an unusually aggressive liver was an accomplishment. By the afternoon, Bridget had identified 6 different food sources that were safe for human consumption, and moderately safe for a few other species with compatible biochemistry. She had also shown us how to build a shelter using local materials, which involved weaving together branches from a tree that oozed caustic resin, leaves from a bush that attracted biting insects, and mud from a pit that smelled like death. It is not pretty, she admitted, standing back to admire her construction, which looked like something a concussed architect might design during a fever dream, but it is waterproof, insulated, and the smell actually keeps most predators away. The smell keeps everything away, Thorne muttered, his massive frame hunched away from the shelter. Including us, you get used to it. Plus, better than sleeping in the rain, right? That night proved her right, unfortunately. The rain returned, heavier than before, and this time it was accompanied by what Bridget cheerfully called a light electrical storm. Lightning struck close enough that I could feel the hair on my carapace stand up. The temperature dropped to near freezing, and something large circled our camp, just beyond the range of our lights. We huddled in Bridget's nightmare shelter, which, as she had promised, kept us dry and relatively warm. The smell was unbearable, but bearable was apparently a flexible concept. The circling predator came closer. We could hear its breathing, heavy and rhythmic. Something scraped against the shelter wall. Claws. Maybe. Or teeth. Or some horrifying combination of both. Should we shoot it? It whispered, his color now a terrified white. Nah, Bridget said calmly. It is just curious. If it wanted to attack, it would have already. Plus, we smell like death mud and caustic tree sap. Pretty good predator deterrent. The creature made a sound somewhere between a cough and a growl, and then we heard it retreat back into the jungle. See? Totally fine. I was beginning to suspect that Bridget's definition of totally fine and my definition of totally fine existed in entirely different universes. But I was also beginning to realize something else. Something that both terrified and fascinated me in equal measure. Every single one of Bridget's insane survival techniques was working. The water was drinkable. The food, while disgusting, was edible. The shelter, despite smelling like a chemical weapons facility, was keeping us alive. Which meant either Bridget was extraordinarily lucky, Or humans had developed survival skills that the rest of the galaxy had never needed to learn. I was starting to suspect it was the latter. And that thought kept me awake long after everyone else had fallen into exhausted sleep. Day 4. We had lost only 3 cadets to emergency beacon activations, which was apparently some kind of record. The rest of us had settled into a routine that could generously be described as organized chaos, and more accurately described as following Bridget around and trying not to die. That was when Cadet Lixthera, a Vendorian intelligence specialist with access to the Coalition database, made a discovery that explained absolutely everything and simultaneously made everything so much worse. I looked up Earth, she announced during our morning meal of bitter purple fruits and filtered semi-toxic water. In the Galactic Hazard Classification System, Bridget looked up from where she was showing Quicks how to identify edible grubs.
Oh yeah?
What are we, Class 1? No. Class 2? That seems high. Lixthara's communication tendrils were vibrating with what I had learned to recognize as severe distress. Earth is classified as a Class 12 Deathworld. The entire camp went silent. Someone dropped their ration container. Thorin made a choking sound. I am sorry, I said carefully, certain I had misheard. Did you say Class 12? Class 12 Deathworld. One of only 6 planets in the known galaxy with that designation. The classification notes describe it as, quote, actively hostile to life, with environmental conditions ranging from extreme to catastrophic, dominant species, inexplicably adapted to survive conditions that would be immediately lethal to most galactic life forms, end quote. Bridget blinked. Ah, that seems a little dramatic. Dramatic? Vic's color had gone completely transparent, which I did not even know was possible. This is a Class 3 world, Class 3. You are from a Class 12, that is 4 times worse. 4 times. Okay, but like, Earth is not that bad, Bridget protested. I mean, sure, we have hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes, and yeah, the wildlife can be a bit much sometimes, but you just have to pay attention, you know? The database lists 57 distinct environmental threat categories present on Earth. Lixthera continued, reading from her datapad with the tone of someone reciting horror literature, including but not limited to superstorms capable of leveling cities, tectonic instability across 70% of the surface, extreme temperature variations, high-intensity solar radiations, atmospheric electivity, aggressive microbial life, and a dominant species that apparently evolved by fighting everything else on the planet simultaneously. That last part is weirdly accurate, Bridget admitted. Humans did basically violence our way to the top of the food chain, but in our defense everything else was trying to violence us first. I felt my understanding of reality shift in uncomfortable ways. So when you said your summer camp was comparable to this place, I mean, yeah, Camp Wilderness Edge was pretty hardcore. They dropped us in the Everglades for 2 weeks with minimal supplies. 3 kids got hypothermia, 1 got bit by an alligator, and we all got some kind of parasitic infection. But we learned a lot about teamwork and self-reliance. That is child abuse, Lixthara said flatly. It is character building, Bridget corrected. My parents paid good money for that experience. Your parents paid to have you dropped in a hostile environment full of predators and parasites. Well, when you say it like that it sounds bad. The pieces were clicking into place. Earth was not just dangerous. Earth was so catastrophically lethal that it made Carrick 7 look like a vacation resort. And humans had not just survived there. They had thrived. They had evolved to treat constant mortal peril as background noise. So this, I gestured at the toxic jungle around us, at the acid rain, at the distant sounds of predators. This is actually easier than your normal life. Bridget considered this. I mean, the gravity is a little heavy here, and the oxygen content is lower than optimal. But yeah, it is pretty manageable. Back home I lived in Alaska for a few years. Winters there get down to minus 50 degrees. The sun disappears for months, and the bears will absolutely break into your house if you are not careful. Compared to that, this is basically spring break. There it was again. Spring break. That phrase that had haunted me since we dropped. Your recreational activities are more dangerous than our military survival training, I said slowly, letting the full absurdity of that statement sink in. Oh, definitely. You should see competitive rock climbing, or cave diving, or Australian bushwalking. Now those are dangerous. What is Australian? Thorin asked weakly. A continent on Earth where literally everything is venomous, poisonous, or just really aggressive. Spiders the size of dinner plates, jellyfish that can kill you in minutes, octopi that carry neurotoxins, Snakes, crocodiles, even the plants are nasty. My aunt lives there. Says it builds character. Everything about your planet builds character, Kix muttered. Probably because anything that does not build character kills you immediately, Bridget grinned. Now you are getting it. The extraction shuttle arrived on day 7 to find 44 cadets alive, relatively healthy, and gathered around a campfire eating roasted indigenous wildlife that Bridget had assured us was probably not toxic. Commander Thalek stood at the bottom of the boarding ramp, his eye stalks scanning our group with undisguised shock. You are all alive. Well, except for the 3 who bailed early, Bridget said cheerfully. But yeah, pretty good survival rate, right? The survival rate for this exercise is typically 30%, the commander said slowly. You achieved 93%. How? 43 cadets pointed at Bridget. Cadet O'Malley taught us human survival techniques, sir, I explained. Water filtration, food identification, shelter construction, predator deterrent strategies. All Earth-based methods. The commander's scales rippled in a pattern I had never seen before. Earth methods. Of course, because naturally the Class 12 Deathworld species would find this environment manageable. Wait, you knew? Bridget asked. About Earth's classification? Every instructor knows. Cadet, it is in your admission file. Why do you think we recruited humans for the military? Species that evolve on Class 12 worlds make exceptional soldiers. You are all essentially pre-trained for worst-case scenarios. Bridget looked genuinely surprised. Nobody mentioned that. We try not to. It tends to make the other cadets nervous. I laughed. Actual genuine laughter. Because of course the coalition had known. Of course they had deliberately recruited humans for exactly this reason. And of course, nobody had thought to warn the rest of us that we would be training alongside apex survivors from the galaxy's most hostile planet. On the shuttle ride back, Bridget fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted but content. I watched her peaceful expression and marveled at the sheer absurdity of the universe. Somewhere on Earth, right now, humans were probably doing something they considered normal. Something relaxing, maybe, a recreational activity, and whatever it was, I was absolutely certain it would terrify every other species in the galaxy. Hey, Vrecht, Kix said quietly, his color finally returning to something close to healthy. Think we will get assigned to a human unit after graduation? I considered the question, remembered the rock throw, the moss licking, the casual confidence in the face of constant danger. Honestly? I hope so. Because if this week taught me anything, it is that when things go completely wrong, the humans will call it spring break and teach you how to survive anyway. Bridget snored softly, probably dreaming of even more dangerous vacation destinations, and I realized that somehow, impossibly, I had made it through academy training alongside the galaxy's most terrifying species. The scary part? They had no idea how terrifying they were. Bridget had genuinely thought Earth was normal. She had grown up thinking constant environmental hostility was just how planets worked, and she had gone through 4 years of academy training without anyone explaining that no. Actually, most sapient species do not have to fight their own ecosystem for survival on a daily basis. The shuttle broke atmosphere, leaving Carrick 7 behind. Through the viewport I could see the stars, peaceful and distant. Somewhere out there was Earth, Class 12 Deathworld, home to billions of humans who thought acid rain was an inconvenience. Mega predators were a nuisance, and environmental catastrophes were just spicy weather. And somehow, against all logic and reason, they had decided to join the Galactic Coalition and share their terrifying survival skills with the rest of us. I was simultaneously grateful and absolutely horrified. Mostly grateful, though, because next time someone drops me on a Deathworld, I am definitely bringing a human.